Hello, welcome back to this channel. I'm so glad you're here today. I'm glad you found your way here. We are going to talk about how to read more because I've gotten that question a few times, and this year I've actually completely increased my reading. I don't know what my reading habits will be like once you see this video because I might be back in lab and then it'll be a little less, but we're going to talk about all of those things right now. Let's just get into it. So I think the first and most obvious tip on how to read more is to actually prioritize reading. I felt like this was the most difficult thing to do, even though it's the most obvious thing to do. But if you want to read more, you just have to do a little less of other things. So I just kind of thought about what are the things in my life that don't really give me any joy or don't really give me anything, and that is mostly hanging around on Instagram or binging Netflix shows. And I love watching a good show, especially with my boyfriend. The two of us love actively watching shows and movies, but I feel like there were a lot of TV shows that I just turn on for just light entertainment, but I wouldn't really get anything out of that experience. And the same with Instagram. So what I've started to do is grabbing my book every time I want to grab my phone. So every single time I feel like checking Instagram, I'll try and grab a book instead and just read a chapter. And that's hoping that the chapters are short. So that is actually a super important thing. And when I started reading more, I reduced my screen time by 70%. We're not going to talk exact hours because it's just embarrassing at this point, but that actually really helped. The other thing is to plan your reading. And I think planning was a big thing for me. I like to plan my life in Notion. And if you're interested in that, just let me know and I'll do a Notion tour on how I plan my books. But I have a list of books that I actually have at home, so I know which books are unread and on my physical TBR. But I also have a list of books that I'm interested in, books that I want to read next month, and so forth. So I have several different lists to keep track of which books I want to read when. So I always have a book on hand, which I think is also very important. Because if you always have several books on hand and you don't feel like reading this one particular book, you have a small selection and can just make a different choice. So planning my reading actually really helped increase it, even if that sounds a little too nerdy. The other thing was that I was pretty snippy about audiobooks and ebooks. But now I'm of the opinion, read in whatever way you enjoy it. If you don't want to spend money on books, then go to the library. If you like listening to books, then listen to ebooks. And now thinking of this later on, it was such an ableist view of mine to see reading as only reading a physical copy of a book, because people who have issues with sight or can't see as well, of course they're going to be listening to audiobooks more, for example. And it's of course, they're also reading when they're listening to that, especially if they're not able to read with a physical copy. So that was so ableist of me to think that. And so now I'm just completely open to read in whatever way you enjoy it. I personally prefer reading a physical copy, but for some books, I also really enjoy the audiobook, especially if it's read well. I love listening to Harry Potter, for example. That's a book that I'm basically always listening to. And Lucy Foley's books also were read really well because there were different POVs and every POV was a different voice and the accents were done really well. And it was just so much fun to listen to that. And I don't think I would have gotten the same experience if I had physically with my eyes read the book. So do whatever feels good and right to you. The next point is also stop reading what you don't like. Oh my gosh. And I think this is something that I never used to DNF books. Never. I was always I have to finish reading this book before I can read the next. But you know what? If you're not enjoying it and you're reading in your free time, if this is not required reading of any kind, then stop it. Give up the book, put it away. Do not pressure yourself to read anything that you don't enjoy in your free time. Really, truly. I mean, sometimes it's worth pushing through, but if you have given this book 100 pages of your time and you're still not enjoying it, you know what? Chances are you're probably not going to enjoy it in the next 100 pages either, especially if it's even shorter than that. So just DNF things that you don't like. Do not pressure yourself into reading things that you don't enjoy. What ties into that point is just to have fun. I mean, we're all here to just have fun with books, right? We all enjoy stories. We all enjoy going into a different world. And that should be the main thing, especially if you're doing this in your free time. So have fun with books, whatever way that feels right to you. If that means reading on trains all the time, cool. If that means listening to ebooks, cool. If that means stop reading classics because you don't enjoy classics, then stop reading classics and just enjoy contemporary fiction or whatever you feel good about. The next point is actually joining a book club. So this was kind of difficult for me. I've always wanted to join a book club, but because I live overseas, or I live in Germany, but I read mostly like English books or books written in English, and that made it a little difficult for me, but I've actually found an online book club that I really enjoy. So that's the Late Night Book Club by 3 YouTubers, and they have this great book club. There's a Discord community where you can talk about the different books, and I'm not super active on Discord, but I love reading other people's discussions on the book, and it's just so much fun to see the live stream at the end of the month about the book that you just read. So find something or like a group of people you enjoy reading and reflecting on your books. I mean, I obviously love making videos about them, and that has really motivated me to read more, just because I really like making reviews. I really like thinking about the plot lines and how characters were drawn up, and that actually helped me reflect the books more. So find a book club or a group or anything, an online community that you can read books with and talk to about the books that you're reading. And the other thing, and I think this is super important, is accepting fluctuation. So reading more doesn't necessarily mean that you're always going to be reading more or always reading 10 books a month or 5 books a month or whatever that number is for you, because our life is just always going to be a little different. We have different phases in life. Obviously in lockdown, we've all been probably able to read a little bit more, or some people weren't able to read a lot in lockdown because they were dealing with other mental health issues and couldn't because of that. Me personally, that means that I might be in lab again. When I do my master's thesis, I will be going to a lab every single day, and that's extremely time consuming and difficult, and that can mean doing experiments until late in the evening. So of course I'm going to be reading less than right now when I'm working in home office and can just completely take breaks whenever I need to, or take a lunch break that's like 15 minutes longer. It's nice to have a book goal for maybe the year, because then you can accept those fluctuations within the year. But please don't punish yourself if you notice that in one month you've read less than in the month before, because that just happens. That's just the way life is. So those are my points, or the points that really helped me read more, because this year I've really gone from like 2 books a month to 10, which is pretty amazing. But like I said, I am still in mostly lockdown, and most of my friends do not live in my city anymore. That probably would definitely affect me if all my friends were around me all the time, because then I could be seeing them more. And that just makes a big difference. And once I'm back in lab environment, I might be reading less, but that doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. That's just the natural cycle and fluctuation of life. Let me know what your best reading tips are. Leave them in the comments. I'm super excited always to read what you guys are thinking and what your tips are. And I'm so glad you were here today, and see you soon.